Welcome to Wildlife Outdoors with your host, Russell and Jose. If you have a passion for conservation of the outdoors, or you're enjoying a calming hike in the mountains, an exhilarating kayak trip on the river, feeling a fish on the end of your line, cooking on an open flame in a primitive campsite, or stalking big game, just waiting for the perfect shot, you're in the right place. So put on your boots and polarized sunglasses and come along for the ride.
Welcome back to another episode of Wildlife Outdoors. I'm Russell, joined as always by my co-host Jose. Today we're talking with Dr. Matthew Wilfong, the mind behind the Ecology of Fly Fishing at St. Mary's College of Maryland. He's blending science, conservation, and time on the water to show how understanding a river's ecosystem makes us better anglers and better stewards of the outdoors. Welcome to the show, Dr. Wilfong. How's it going?
Good. How are you? Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Hey, we appreciate your time. I'm excited for this one. Jose sent me a little, message on Instagram a few months back that I guess there was a little meme going around talking about the class that you created. So, before we get into what you're known for now and what we saw there, I'd like to take it back a little bit and kind of learn a little bit more about you and how you got started into fly fishing and things of that nature.
Yeah. I grew up in North Central Maryland. Grew up spin cast fishing, pretty much a lot of my childhood, spending, most of my time outdoors. My dad, avid fly fisher, fly angler, and had been fly fishing his whole life. And I'd always see him going on trips and carrying these big long rod tubes when they had only 2-piece rods, 6-foot like metal tubes. And I would always, think, oh, that seems like a lot of work to put all that together. And it never really tickled, never really thought I'd be interested in fly fishing. I ended up going to undergrad at in the Eastern Shore at a small liberal arts school and played soccer. And my life was, mostly revolved around school and soccer. And then my senior year, after soccer was over, I found myself with a bunch of relatively free time and not having to commit myself to athletics as much anymore. And I thought, maybe I'll decide to, take up fly fishing and really see what it's all about. And at that time, I had just finished my undergraduate education and learning a lot about freshwater ecology, freshwater hydrology, but didn't really see the connections until I started actually beginning to fly fish. So that winter of my senior year, my dad taught me how to build my own rod. So I built my own rod. And then right when that spring, hit, I just, as much free time as I could, wherever I could, I just started practicing some casting, getting on any body of water I could. About 15 minutes from where I grew up is a pretty well structured tailwater called the Gunpowder River. It's a tailwater from 2 dams in the Baltimore County region. So then I just started going out there in the summer, and that whole summer after I graduated, I just was on the river every day for 3 or 4 hours, and just took over my life. And I started seeing the connections of all the kind of scientific things I learned, and then how to apply them in fly fishing. So I just, that aspect was also extremely interesting to me. It just seemed like this huge puzzle of like putting all these pieces together of both my academic side, my, more my hobbies and my interests, and then like, how can I crack this puzzle of how to be the best angler, the best, catch as many fish as I can, but also just like trick the trout into thinking I am presenting something that's natural to them. And that was, it just got me hooked right away.
That's awesome. So what was the first rod that you built?
So I just bought a pretty cheap, at that point I was a relatively broke college student. So I bought some graphite, high modulus graphite, like no name blank on the internet. And then just bought all the different components. It's like a 5-weight, all around rod. And then I just bought all the components off of some website, and just put it all together. And I still have it. Now, I do have a few nicer rods, and comparing the two is always pretty crazy to see what it's like to cast a good rod compared to what I, built when I started out. But I think it did also help me like learn the real foundations of casting, because I wasn't relying on a good rod to learn. I was just relying on real technique to do that. So, maybe, now I feel a little bit spoiled that, a Reddington rod is nothing crazy, but that's what we have for the students here to learn how to cast, and I feel that they're a little spoiled compared to what I never cast on. So
Wait, you guys don't know how good y'all have it.
no, so,
Man, so do you ever bust out that old rod every now and again just for
yeah,
giggles?
yeah, I do. We over the spring, this past spring when I taught the class, there's a pond, farm ponds, tons of farm ponds down here, farm ponds down here. And we took a couple students there to just practice catching bluegill and sunfish
Right.
or whatever. And I brought it out just to, have the students, because at that point, some of the students still weren't as safe as I wanted them to be with a basic rod. So I was like, oh, if you break this one, it's not the end of the world. So I let them use like kind of my older, I probably built maybe 5 or 6 rods and of bettering quality as I've gone through now. And the ones that are like my first take or whatever, I let the students use as well, just in case something happens. It's not
Right.
nothing's lost too much. So
Yeah, that's awesome.
So I've heard a lot of people say in the past that when you're learning to fly fish, sometimes it's better to actually learn on a less nice rod or a cheaper rod or less quality rod, because that's how you can actually find like your faults are exemplified in your casting and stuff like that. So some of your faults might not be fixed, but they might be covered up if you're using a nicer rod. For instance, if you go out and try to learn how to fly fish with a sage rod, the quality of the rod can cover up some of the mistakes that you're making, and then you can get into bad habits doing it that way. So yeah, I mean, potentially worked out better for you to be using that rod to start off with and then progressively work your way up.
yeah, or at least I'll tell myself that. I'm not sure which is. Yeah.
So that's kind of backwards from, I guess, most anglers is people will learn and then they'll find success in catching fish. And then the next step is normally tying flies. And then some people get to the point of building rods. So what made you want to start with building a rod?
Honestly, my dad had built a few rods in his, throughout his life, and he had a bunch of like handmade equipment, like a handmade spool or one to spin the thread on the and onto to make the to seat the guides and stuff. And I was home for a Christmas break my senior year and had a bunch of free time, and I just like, well, let me just fill that free time and build a rod. And at that point, I knew that there are probably cheap ways to date rods or like hand me downs and stuff. But I was like, this is probably the second cheapest way, or maybe even the cheapest way I can get a rod in my hand. So I was like, why not try it? And yeah, I highly advocate for it. If you have the bandwidth, and not a lot of people do, but you have the bandwidth to build your own rod, it's a really same as flying, tying your own flies. It's a very extremely rewarding process. And then especially when you catch a fish on your own fly and your own rod, it's just like that next level of like, the full circle moment for sure.
And then you mentioned that, Matt, that you had started originally fishing with like spin gear and stuff. And then your dad was, having to fly fishing. And then now, like you said, your dad showed you how to build your rod. So I guess that must have been a pretty cool moment for him as a father too. Like, your son finally like having some time and wanting to learn the trade. And how was that experience? Like being able to, I guess, to build that together with your father.
Yeah, I think even it's definitely, it brought us a lot, not that we weren't close before, but brought us a lot closer in that process. And even now, like, we have like just, fishing trips, every, especially throughout the summer, or the late spring, early summer, main trout season here. So, that's been so rewarding. And now it's to the point where I have 2 clients that I have to tie flies for, myself and him. So, that's also been a lot of fun too. Is like he showed me how to tie his first, which is actually one of the hardest, well, not hardest, but a pretty hard fly to tie to start off with, is like a muddler minnow, like, spun deer hair. And that's not how you should learn to tie your first fly. Definitely not that. He grew up fishing, and a lot of those like a tractor like streamers that push a bunch of water on like mountain streams up in West Virginia. So that's what he wanted. So I learned how to tie a muddler first, because that's what I knew they were going to be used for. He wanted those to use. So I think collectively I really enjoyed that aspect of the fishing. Like so much, I said, I've told the students that so much of the fishing is not just being out there on the water. It's all the community building, not just
Mhm.
with family, but with friends, but also with, the broader fishing community and the, connection with the environment and, the connection that I've been able to kind of foster with my dad, and just spending more time out in the water and enjoying each other's company, and also just being able to tell each other, you know, fish stories as well, and separate on, nights going on different holes or whatever, or different rivers, and then come back and see who has the best story or the best lie is also a lot of fun too. So
That's awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah, the fly fishing community, and I mean the fishing community, in a broader sense, is a pretty tight community. But there's something special to be said about the fly fishing community and how I don't know. We almost seem to be more, I guess, more in tune. I don't know if it's the intimacy of the action of actually fly fishing. It's just a far more intimate experience with the fish. Typically, you're sight casting. You feel every head shake a little more. It's just a more in tuned experience, but to me, it seems like the fly fishing community seems to be a little bit more inclined to be conservationists and care more about the health of the fish, the health of the water, and things like that. So, have you noticed how that played any part in how your career has led in comparison to you growing up, a spin cast fisherman and then fly fisherman, and then now you're a professor?
yeah, I think there definitely is a connection. I echo kind of your same sentiment. And again, that's not to say that spin cast fishermen are not geared towards conservation. I don't think that's the case. Uh, you know, yeah, for the most part, right? But I think that it does promote this more intimate um relationship. But also, I find myself, and again, this is my own personal kind of standpoint, but I didn't, especially when I was younger in spin cast fishing, I didn't find myself trying to solve something or solve a puzzle or solve a riddle, if you will, about what I needed to do to catch fish. I was just throwing bait or throwing like some general lure. But I find myself with fly fishing in general for most species, it's some I'm having to, troubleshoot and try and learn, and every process, every time I go out is another learning experience. Most of the time learning what not to do or to change, right? But that's what I think leads a lot of finders towards the conservation or towards an intimacy portion of that. Is it's such trial and error and a feedback mechanism where you need to learn both literally on the fly, but also over the course of that kind of, you know, 1 year, 2 year, whatever, 10 years in that fishing that area or fishing for that species. And I think that promotes that really tight knit relationship with the ecosystem, but also tight knit relationship amongst that community in that area
Yeah.
that's fishing a river or fishing, a larger body of water or whatever it is, for sure.
Absolutely. And fly fishing, just in the sense of it, for any of our listeners that may not be fly anglers. So if you're out there bait fishing, it's obviously a scent induced thing that you're going to be trying to catch fish with. Typically, if you're going to be spin casting or bait casting, you're going to be using some type of bait or some type of lure that is going to entice an aggressive take or a reactionary bite. And with fly fishing, you're trying more to match the hatch. Well, the term is match the hatch, but you're trying to match a natural forage of that species of fish, whether you're fishing trout up in the mountains or you're fishing for tarpon down in Florida. I mean, you're trying to mimic whatever the fish is going to eat naturally because you don't have all these different bright colors and rattles in them, which you can tie flies with rattles in them, but majority of them you don't tie flies with rattles in them. You don't have any scent or anything like that. So I can definitely see how um, you're trying to be more in tuned on trying to actually learn the fish and learn the different life cycles of the insects and learn what part of the water, what water column they're going to be in based on the season, based on the temperature, based on the water clarity, and then there's so many more things that you need to learn to be successful in fly fishing. And there are some people that, it's not about catching the fish. And I think that there's a lot of fly fishermen that tend to be that way, but at the same time, you do want to have some success. And if you want to be successful in any way, you kind of have to have a little bit of an understanding of all of the aspects. So is that something where you teach each of those aspects throughout your course?
Yeah, so the way the course kind of broke down and last spring was the first time I got the opportunity to teach it. I'm teaching it again this spring as well, and toying with some small changes. But I broke the semester down into three main sections. The first one was called Reading the Water. So we don't have a kind of basic hydrology class here at St. Mary's. So it was like introducing them to basic like watershed hydrology, and then building upon that to the point where they could identify using like basic hydrology and using like those principles that help identify where fish, especially, keening in on trout, where they might be, located in a river based on certain conditions. So like for our one exam, it was like, expecting these, a question like expecting these flows in these water conditions and these temperatures with this stream channel, where would you expect to find fish and why? So like walking them through, but only after building upon the scientific, portions of that, right? So, and then the second module was, as you referred to, called matching the hatch, where we covered kind of the ecology, right? So like if we want to understand what trout or any fish are eating in these freshwater systems, we have to understand the ecology and the connections between those species. So again, similarly, we went out and actually did macroinvertebrate sampling, so the small little bugs that are in the river, and we like helped them identify like these are caddis, these are stonefly, these are mayflies, whatever. Not to the like this is a sulfur all the way down to that level, but to the usable for a general population. And then similarly, like on exam, we had questions like if you see a bud that is flying in this way and looks like this, hatching, what fly would you tie on to try to mimic that hatch? And we would also do like visual representations as well. Like I would have like the flies out in front of me, and I would say, if these are the water conditions and this time of year, and you see these buds, which of these flies would you put on and why?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not as, I think that was also really fun for them because it wasn't as kind of like cut and dry as like, from a normal, exam, just being, picking one particular answer. They had to explain by using all the scientific kind of background to explain why they would make these choices, which even if fly anglers don't think they are doing that, we are doing that when we make those decisions. Why we fish a hole or we pass up a hole. Why we tie on one fly versus another. We are doing all those calculations in our head. We just might not explicitly think we are doing scientific calculations, right? But we are, right? So just having the students do that and realize that is a part of the scientific process was a lot of fun. And I think the students really enjoyed it.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And sorry, I didn't mention the third module. The last one was more kind of the, the actual, like what it means to be a fly angler, like the conservation side, this more like the social ethic side. Like how does angling connect with conservation? What is catch and release angling, and why might that be important towards conservation? So more like what does it mean to be a fly angler in a angling community, and all those kind of like more social ethical aspects as well, which we really push a lot of our classes to be interdisciplinary here at the college because we are so small. We try to cover a lot. So this was like that section where students could also think about the more social ethical dimensions of conservation and the angling as well.
I see.
That's awesome.
Now I'd like to tell you about a couple of our sponsors. First, we have Bucked Up. When you're out in the wild, whether you're stalking a trophy buck, casting for that elusive bass, or trekking through rugged terrain, you need more than just grit. You need fuel that matches your passion for the outdoors. That's where Bucked Up energy drinks and supplements come in. Crafted for those who live life on the edge, Bucked Up offers a range of products designed to enhance your performance, endurance, and recovery. From the early morning hunts to the late night fishing trips, Bucked Up has your back. Use promo code WLO20 at checkout to receive 20% off your order. Explore their full range of products by clicking on the link in the description. Next, we have Foretold Coffee Company. Start your adventure with a brew as bold as the journey ahead. Foretold Coffee Company crafts ethically sourced small batch roast for those who find peace in the wild. Founded by Army veteran Joshua Sandoval, each cup reflects resilience, exploration, and the spirit of the outdoors. Whether it's the light Peruvian cocoa, the medium El Salvadoran bourbon, or the dark Mexican honey, each cup is perfect for the base camp mornings or fireside evenings. Subscribe to their monthly coffee club for 10% off and stay fueled for every expedition. To learn more, visit foretoldcoffeeco.com.
And I wish they offered a class like that when I was in college. That'd been sweet. But so that's really interesting. So when you were first toying with the idea of introducing a class revolving around the subject matter, and taking like that idea to the university and trying to get that approval, like were they pretty receptive to that idea, or was there like a little bit of apprehension on that part of like whether or not this should like really be a class or be taught?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, I feel very lucky to say this for sure. It was met with open arms. When I interviewed for the visiting position, when I first, for the temporary position, the first time, it was all on Zoom because I was out in Arizona, for a postdoc, and I had a panel of like interviewed with a panel of like 10 students, to get like a student perspective on the college and things like that. And one of the students asked me like, what would your dream class that you could teach? And at this point, because I was on the job market and a lot of questions, a lot of times when you interview for academic positions, they want to get an idea of what classes you want to teach, both elective wise, but also you can teach from more foundational. So I already had this kind of idea like simmering in my head about what would my perfect class be if I wanted to be, ended up being this class. So he asked me and I, gave him this response, and he, similar to your response, Jose, he was like, I would love to take your class. The students said this. So I ended up getting the position as we talked about. And my first semester or my first year, a couple students asked my department head, like, "Oh yeah, Dr. Wilfong said he was going to teach this class. Is that possible?" And they were like, "Oh, maybe not the first year." So then the fall of last year, coming into the spring, my department head was like, What do you think about teaching that class?" And I was like, I almost had a pause, like, are you for real? Like, this is not like Christmas or anything like that, or something fake. So he was like, yeah, I think it would be perfect fit for what we need at the time. We're an environmental studies department, and we're a little more heavy on the studies, kind of the social science, policy, and humanities side, and not as maybe not as strong. That's not the word, but we have a little bit less representation in the science side. So we needed an additional science kind of environmental science course for the spring, and this kind of fit that mold really, really well. So, and I think I said this in the article as well. One, not concern, but one kind of not issue, but one obstacle potentially is that all of the fly fishing instruction and the additional kind of that additional aspect is actually outside class. So our lectures, or the in class period is mainly geared to the traditional science aspect, and we talk about fly fishing and we talk about the connections and all that in that class period. But learning to fly cast, doing the macroinvertebrate sampling, going out to streams. We had a camping trip at the end of the semester. That was all outside of class time and all completely optional. So that it does become like an addition, not a burden, but it's an additional kind of time, that you have to put in as an instructor, but it's extremely rewarding. And I would probably spend my time doing those things anyways. So it wasn't a big, not a big concern for me. But I will, echo that sentiment, once more that, I feel extremely lucky that it was met with such kind of open arms, both from like a departmental side, but then also an institutional backing, like, especially after the Fly Lords article was published, the kind of overarching response from the administration was like, this is exactly what a college of our size, and when we talk about experiential or hands-on or applied learning, like this is exactly what that encapsulates. So it's the perfect rendition of what we try to do at St. Mary's. So hearing all those things and getting the feedback there was also really great. So
Man, the
That's
fact that you
awesome.
got like a student backing that idea right away, I think is a huge testament to like how excited these folks get for something like that. And
yeah.
I guess it kind of goes into my other question. So I imagine that you probably get a lot of students who are or have like done some kind of fishing in their life. Maybe not necessarily fly fishing, but some kind of fishing. But have you also gotten students in your class who maybe did not come from that background, and like this is a new foray into something different that they're experiencing?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I can think of at least 3 or 4. I mean, the class was 18, the first semester or last spring. I didn't think of 4 that had never gone fishing in their life.
Oh, wow.
And on the camp, when we went camping, we had only 8 students ended up going on the camping trip, and half of them had never stayed in a tent overnight.
Oh,
So
wow.
just that, like, that's just a small, example, but though, opening this, that's what also the class was about, is just opening their perspective to different ways of relating to and knowing the environment too. Like we really, think of the environment as, it's especially from a, academic sense, like the scientific, ways to interact with the environment, but there's many other ways, like, and angling is a great way to kind of bridge that gap between like the science aspect and the more personal as well. Um, and I had, a student who after the semester was like, I think, I really enjoyed the class and uh, I learned a lot, but fishing is just not for me. And
Right.
especially we talked about the or the ethical side of angling, and catch and release was brought up great arguments and had a great perspective on why they don't think angling is kind of ethical. And
And
of course, and they were very firm in their stance, but they brought up but it was also a learning experience for the rest of those in the class that they take fishing for granted, or they've always fished for their entire lives. But it was also a great example of like what, like, not debate, but like what meaningful conversation with people can actually be beneficial for both parties. Um, which is rare in our country right now, is actually being able to someone and actually have meaningful conversation. So I really appreciate it. I told the student, like, after the semester, you know, if you never want to fish, that's great. But I hope you did learn and you brought something to the class that I really appreciate. Like, if we had all students who love fishing and, already knew everything, that's not what this class is about, right? It's about broadening our horizons. So, I think we do have uh, a student body in general that is, definitely, not primarily hunter angler types, if you will. So I think, being able to offer this class also, you know, pushes those bounds as well, of getting students out of their comfort zone, but in ways that will hopefully benefit them, even if it's just different ways of thinking or different ways of engaging with the environment, which
yeah,
I really appreciate.
man, that's awesome. Shout out to that
Mhm.
student for like hanging in there and giving it like an actual shot.
Yeah,
That's pretty
Yeah.
incredible.
yeah.
And then I guess on the opposite side of that coin, have you had students who had never gone fishing, camping, anything like that, but after taking a class were like, I think this is something that I want to keep pursuing.
Yeah, yeah. I have one student who actually I'm actually we have a senior project. It's called the St. Mary's project. It's like a senior thesis, full year, and I'm actually overseeing her project. And it's all about kind of like river ecology. After she took the
Mhm.
class, she was like, I didn't know I was so interested in river ecology until I took your class. And now, over the summer, she borrowed one of the fly rods to take home with her for the summer. And she's like, I definitely see myself, being more, involved in angling, and you're spending more time on rivers. She's applying for graduate programs in, river ecology. So, that's one. But there are definitely others, multiple students who, and I think there's a few quotes in the Fly Lords article for one of the exam questions was, and not really exam, it's like reflection questions, if you will. That, do you think you'll continue to fish or fly fish? And one student said that grew up thinking fishing was gross and dirty, and now realizes it's much more than that, and it's a way to connect with family and all these other aspects. So yeah, I think, um, getting there will be hopefully many more students that are take that interest and expand on that as a result of the class.
That's awesome. And that student, the one that you mentioned in that Fly Lord article, or regarding the Fly Lords article, I should say, I think that's really interesting. The fact that they thought fishing was like gross and whatever, but still willingly and purposefully enrolled in your course and like hung in there. Like, man, that's really cool that they were that open minded to just not like write it off and at least like give it a shot.
Yeah, I think, yeah, yeah, I think we have, we're a public liberal arts college here, so we really do uh push our students to, like I said before, expand their bounds and really test, different. And well, we also reward that, right? Because if
Yeah.
you don't do that, you can't take the more fun or whatever fun classes, right? Or more fun electives. So I think the students kind of buy into that, right? They say like, I might not agree, or I might not, this might not be my cup of tea, but at least I'll know I'll have fun doing it, or I'll, learn something by doing it. So, I think we reward the students for making those, choices for sure.
Love that, dude.
That's
That's awesome,
awesome.
man. And then I guess like a more, I guess, like whimsical question. Do any of your students ever hit you up like, yo, Dr. Wilfong, want to go fishing or something?
Yeah, yeah. Over the summer, two of the students who had graduated, we had a majority seniors, I will say. Two of them that had graduated came back down to campus for events, and during the summer, parts of the summer, we had pretty good rockfish fishing here on the St. Mary's River. So we got out on the water and got them out. We have a really I teach almost all freshman classes right now. Uh, that are not the Ecology of Fly Fishing class. And the cohort of students that have started now, like this semester, there's at least I can think of a dozen that are extremely interested in fishing. So like there's a bridge that goes across, or runs along the river that you have to basically drive along to get out and go back towards town and back towards my house. And every day when I leave, I see the same students fishing. I always honk the horn, and the next day when I see them in class, they give me a full breakdown of what they were fishing for. And they do most of the spin and bait casting. But it's just nice to be able to, like, because of that similar connection, being able to connect with students in different ways, not in the classroom, but then also outside of the classroom. And that's the whole reason I wanted to teach at a school like this, where it's, we only have about 1,600 students, and class
Oh, wow.
sizes rarely get above 20. Sometimes you might have pushing 30, but it's extremely rare. So you get to know your students, you get to have a connection with them. And fishing is just like another way to do that. And students, like, especially in their free time, they spend so much time doing it. It's a great way to kind of like, instead of asking them like how their last class was, I can be like, oh, how was fishing, last night, or when you've been going out, what are the tides like when you've been catching fish? And I think that's been great to being able to, use that to connect to the students.
Yeah.
It also just makes me seem, I, like you alluded to, I am on the younger side for sure for faculty members, but it also makes me hopefully seem like I'm just a regular person. Now I have hobbies and interests just like them, which I think the students appreciate too. So.
Yeah, for sure. I can see how that would make you a lot more relatable to the younger generation, the young adults that are, in college. So, but I also think it's amazing that there's a good mix of people that are in your class, whether they be, anglers or not anglers, or just, being pushed outside of their boundaries. And it's a great thing for the fly fishing community and the fishing community in general, because the more people that we have doing the sport is the more people that care about it, the more people that want to protect it. And I think that's something that, as we look historically, the rates of hunters and fishers are, dwindling. And percentage wise, we have a lot more people in the world and we have less people fishing. So there may be more people out there fishing, but percentage wise, we have less. And I think the more people that we get interested in it, which I think you're doing a great job, doing there, it seems like, the more people that we have that can team together and can make a difference. I mean, there's so many ecological things that are not good based on human interactions with, wildlife and ecology. And the more people we have caring about it, the more things that we can change to make these resources last for generations to come. And I think that's a really important thing.
Yeah, and I think adding on to that, and I completely agree. Like and we've alluded to this earlier, like what fly fishing does is it just puts you out there and makes you be a part of that system and be so intimately connected, where you can see it's impossible to ignore those connections or those issues that might arise or that are arising in ecosystems, right? So like,
Yeah.
even if, again, what I really, we push our students, not just in this class, but in general, when we talk about being environmental stewards, is like, this education makes it so that way it's impossible not to see these things anymore, right? And it puts you in that perspective where you are now kind of seen almost like for general population, invisible things that hopefully now you want to, have made meaningful contributions towards FTSE. And fly fishing is just one of many examples, but I think an extremely good one. Like, you can't go if you go to a stream that's degraded, you're not going to find the fish, especially trout, right? You're not going to find the fish that you want. It's going to be impossible to ignore that because you're not going to go either not going to go back to the stream or you're going to want to do something to fix it. So I think that makes a big difference.
Absolutely. So when you were creating this class, because it seems like it's an elective class, but there's also a lot of science that ties into it. And you said you had that student that went on to actually do river ecology, after taking your class. So when you're developing the class, how does that process even go? Because it seems like it could be something that could lead into other degree paths. And like, how do you even go about developing a class and getting a curriculum together and knowing which way you need to go with it?
Yeah, it's a lot of trial and error, I'll say. I mean, there's definitely some things or ways I taught certain things this past spring that I'm going to change for this spring coming forward. But I think you approach it with, I approach a lot of the classes with what skills do I want the students to leave this class with? And a lot of them are overarching skills that we try to cover across the curriculum: critical thinking, information literacy, like those type of like big picture skills. But then for this class, it was like, what do I want them to leave with in terms of both from a fly fishing perspective, but also from a scientific perspective, and then scaffolding those kind of skills. Like, I have to do these things in order for them to get the skill. Like, if I want them to be able to quote unquote read the water, they need to understand basic hydrology. They need to understand like how water flows on the landscape. If they don't understand that, they can't. It's not that they can't read the water, but it's going to be more difficult, right? So it's like also like scaffolding those things out. But I think there is no, or maybe I'm just telling myself this, there is no wrong way to do it, right? I think because there is, at least at this and at St. Mary's, we don't have a course that's similar. Like there things that are covered in this course are so different compared to the other courses that we offer. All of it is relatively new. So, there is there's a lot of just novel ways to engage with the environment that's covered here or covered in the class. But in terms of like actually how to lay that out throughout the semester, a lot of it was also just practical too. So like the reading the water stuff was a lot of the scientific heavy, where it's called in the spring. So January, February, March, it's not that we can't get out into the streams. It's just much difficult, and students aren't too fond of being out in the cold. Not that I am either, not that much. So doing those things during that time of the year makes a lot of sense. And then getting into the reading the water when when we can get out and do some macroinvertebrate sampling, lends itself that as well. And then the last section is we are actually going to be going out to do some fishing. So when we start that process, I want them to be thinking the ethical concerns of what is catch and release, how to handle fish, all those components. I wanted to teach that while we were actually doing that, outside of the classroom too. Mm-hmm. But I think you can probably ask almost every professor if they think their class is perfect, and I would imagine most of them will say no. I think they're always changing it. That's also the benefit of or a big perk of academia is like I can change and tinker with my curriculum and with the way I'm teaching it, and have relative a lot of freedom in that process. And then you also like, depending on your level of humility and you can also just ask the students, did it work? And I ask my students, we have end of the semester course evaluation, but I ask the students to do mid-semester evaluation for every class. Like, if something's not working, please let me know, and I'll change it. Like, I want this to be beneficial to you. So I'll take those reviews that I got from the class and, what didn't work, what did, and use that to adapt, for this coming spring. So it's similar to like what we talked about with fly fishing. It's a trial and error, constantly building, constantly reflecting. And that's also what's fun about it too, in my opinion. So.
That's awesome. So going from the development of it and then actually teaching the class, how did you manage to just learn how to teach the students? Like, I guess we could break it down per each module. So, reading the water, that's something that obviously, you learn over the years, being out there and doing it. So how do you break that down into an academic way to teach it in the classroom?
Yeah. So we first started basic water cycle, like breaking it down really basic, and then we covered all the different ways in which stream flow is affected. We covered like Roskin stream classifications, like what are the different types of streams, what are the different stream environments, and how does that affect flow, uh, and all the way down, all the way into the different hydrology standpoints. And then honestly, what we did for the then with connection with identifying or reading the water and finding where areas with trout, we watched tons of videos of just like flowing water. For a lot of it, it was just like over head down or like side views of streams, and it's like based on what we've learned and like where eddies might be or back currents or the way in which water might flow around this rock or water might flow around this tree branch or whatever. Where do you think fish might be and why? So that's the way we kind of tackle it. Is it's at least for each of these, it was always building upon the scientific processes for multiple classes, and always being really strategic about how to tie in fly fishing, like always leaving that little morsel for them to be like, okay, this is still a fly fishing class to some extent, but some classes it was all the scientific portion, and it wasn't until maybe a class or two later we would tie it back into the fly fishing aspect of it. But I think they helping them or always letting them know that this is important and why it was important, like even that little crumb of like how does this tie into fly fishing, and or especially how do I use it for fly fishing now, was really, really important to not kind of lose them. Like don't want to get lost in all the scientific process. So that's kind of the way I approached it. And I got, good feedback from the students, on that approach. I think in general, it is a balance, right? And it's a balance from a rigor standpoint as well. Like we want the students to also be challenged, so it's not, we can't be like, every class period, we're just going to go out to the stream, so it's, trying to find that balance where they're continue to be motivated, they're continue to be interested, but then also pushing themselves. And that also helps the motivation in general, right? When I found myself from when I was in college, and I would see most students here, if they're not pushed a little bit, at least to some extent, they kind of check out. So like also pushing them in that standpoint really helped them maintain involvement. But it wasn't a huge issue in general.
So you basically roll from hydrology and you put little nuggets of like, okay, well, this is what the water's going to look like when you're reading it because of this scientific reason, but the fish will most likely be in the slack water behind this boulder or something like that. So you just like leave little morsels for them. Do you do the same thing with, the next module when it comes to matching the hatch? Because I feel like that's more of a fly fishing focused module. How much other scientific things do you teach, whether it be entomology or anything like that, or the fish species? Is it kind of half and half, or is it more leaning towards fly fishing in that module, or how does that work?
Yeah, I would say it's more approaching half and half. So we cover, basic ecology. So some of the students had taken, we have a bio class here called Ecology and Evolution, but some of the students hadn't. So like covering, what are ecosystems? Like why are, ecosystems, an ecosystems approach is seeing all the connections in like food webs and food chains and stuff like that. So like we start very basic that way. Like if we want, we know that fly angling, and by this time we've already introduced it, is, and as you alluded to earlier in the conversation, we're kind of trying to match or what the fish species are foraging by the, naturally, we need to see those connections in the food chain. So it's like starting very basic, kind of the ecology basics, and then building upon that. Okay, we know that the majority of their diet is the nymph form of all these different species, and then we cover the entomology of the life cycles of caddis, the life cycles of mayfly, the life cycles of the stonefly, to the point where then they, again, getting back to like their questions, we would ask them like, if we would show them pictures of different flies and being like, is this the the spinner version? Is this the NY? Is this a caddis and that's already an adult caddis or a caddis larva, a caddis pupa, like all the way through that. So it's definitely a lot of the science foundation of that, getting into the ecology and entomology, but then it's such a good, easy connection with all the kind of fly fishing principles of matching the hatch that it's much more, it's less crumbs and it's much more like full meal almost in
I
that
see.
in that portion. Which again, at that point, a lot of the students are so already bought in, or like already bought to the class, right? So then having them make those connections is makes a lot of sense.
And then heading into the third module, it's basically like majority fly fishing is what it seems like, whether it be the scientific or the social side of it. So how do you break that down, and what's the process of what you teach in the third module?
Yeah, so that module again is really like very practical. Like I think it's the most practical, like not just from a fly angling standpoint, but also practical about about their relationship with the environment or the way in which they perceive and their position in the environment. So it's a lot of like, it's not an environment, it's not an ethics class, but we cover like, what is their personal relationship with the environment? How does angling either change that, or how is angling different than your current relationship with the environment? What are the efforts around catch and release? And like, what does that mean for conservation? A lot of it, this past spring, we had and I think I alluded to this in the article. We had um, an event where we had 3 alum come back who are all they're all fly fish, and they all came back, and we had a panel on the connection between conservation and fly fishing, or angling in general. So a lot of that was geared towards preparing the students to be a part of that conversation. So, what does it mean? Like, again, there is the general, maybe not general, but there is a portion of the campus community that see conservation and angling as completely, they're oxymoron. They do not, they don't go together. So like,
Yeah.
challenging them to see the ways in which they are, part and parcel with one another, and actually anglers and hunters can be, and most of the time are, the most prominent conservationists across the board, right? So a lot of that was also challenging, those dudes in that sense. And the feedback again from Matt was, we alluded to the student earlier, they weren't planning on catching fish in their life, but they understood, and they saw the connection and how angling can actually improve conservation efforts, right? So that's the way I kind of formatted for that reason.
For sure. Yeah, and it's weird, like the ethical dichotomy of it is, and we've spoke about this previously on the podcast, that you love something so much, but yet, in the sense of hunting, you're harvesting something, and sometimes in the sense of fishing, you are harvesting things. But there's just a care and a love about the animal, the environment in general. And, there's people that go and recreate outdoors on the rivers and things like that will just leave litter and leave trash, and people that'll go floating and just leave their beer cans in the river and stuff like that. And then you see fishermen go out there and leaving with more than they came with, because they see trash on the banks and they just want to leave it nicer. And I mean, the way that people handle fish, especially in the fly fishing community, if you're going to grab a trout, you make sure your hands are wet. There's a lot of things that we do. We seem to care more about the environment. And I think people from the outside that are not hunters or anglers look at it and you're like, well, if you're putting a hook through something's face, you don't like it and you don't love it and you're harming it. And I feel like your class could be a way for people that are on that side of it, it's a way for them to realize, like, oh, wow, we actually do want to be responsible stewards of this. And we do care about this animal and we want to treat it with respect. We enjoy the recreation of it, but we also want to respect it. And it is, I mean, I can see how it can seem oxymoronic to somebody that is outside of the recreation field not doing it. So it's awesome. Earlier when you said that you have people coming through your class that didn't grow up fishing, didn't grow up hunting, and yet they're still, even after the class, having an interest in it. Like, I think that's an amazing thing that you're doing.
Yeah. And it's very rewarding for me, right? And just to see them, in general, like you become a teacher in general, right? To see your students, right, and seeing them grow in, especially in a hobby that I'm interested in and I care a lot about, and seeing them like kind of sink their teeth into that, similar to like Jose said about like what he think, my father, when he saw me build a raw, I'm sure it's probably similar to that feeling that I see, students, sending me pictures of fish they're catching and stuff like that. It makes me, makes you feel that I'm, having a tangible, impact, both, on the environment, which is, but also like on the students' lives. And and their
Yeah.
outlook on the environment is a lot of fun for sure.
So, in your experience, now that you're going into your second semester teaching this class, how can other outdoor educators or guides or other anglers help spread this ecological literacy through fishing and things like that? Like, do you have any tips that other people, regular people that are teaching others to fish can use?
Yeah, I would say, and I know a lot of guides who do this. When the fishing is slow, like really rely on teaching or like educating about the connections with conservation or the connections with ecology or the connections with hydrology. Um, I think for me, and I think that one of the last couple of lines in the article when me and the co-author Kirk wrote is I say something along the lines of, we just need more people out there, more people knowledgeable about the connections, about the issues, right? So, my big plea is like just get more educate anyone who willing to listen about the connections, because again, once you see those connections, once you see or harness or like cultivate that relationship, it's impossible not to have more care or want to be more committed towards conservation. Um, when I first started, and I even now I find myself grappling with this from time to time, and it was especially relevant during COVID when a lot of people were getting outdoors just to get away from being around their TV screens and being shut in and all these things. I would find myself going to the river and seeing more people and almost being like, I cannot believe there's more people here, and getting like almost angry, but like that's what we need. Like, and every time I find myself like, oh, there's someone parked in the spot I wanted to start fishing, being like having to take a beat, like take a step and say, this is another person who cares about what I'm likely, right? I'm not, no, but likely cares about what I care to do. And having more people out here is actually likely going to be more long-term benefit towards this river, right? There's going to be more conservation. There's going to be more protection. So, being able to like just take a step to be like, this is actually beneficial in one. Now, do I still wish I could fish that section? Maybe, but I can always come back another time and fish that section, right? So, that's what I would say. And like, I would say, and we alluded to this, earlier to it. A lot of the fly fishing community is extremely generous with their time, with their knowledge in general. But I would say we can do a lot more. Like, the people who don't want to tell a particular spot or like spot burn. That's one thing, but not being able to tell someone if you pass by what fly is working is like, or like why you're using something, why you're fishing that area. Like that's not beneficial to anyone, right? That teaching that person that you're passing the river why you're using a caddis at this particular time and why it's working for you, that person is going to be more knowledgeable and is going to spread that to someone else. And it's just a ripple effect going forward. So I know that's a very small subset. And I think in general, like we said before, the fly fishing community is very receptive towards all these things. But I think, we can definitely do more and work more with restoration initiatives or conservation initiatives if you have the time and kind of bandwidth to do that, right? And that's something that I'm trying to for this coming spring is to work with a couple on company for NGOs towards conservation endpoints as a part of this class, right? So like they'll be able to see like how this fly fishing community is part of something broader, like part of some broader environmental conservation community as well. So yeah, I think we all can do our part, and just it's spreading that knowledge is will do a world of good for sure.
Absolutely. Do you have any NGOs in mind that you're looking at working with?
So we have one of the alums that came for the talk last spring. He's the CEO of a small NGO that's called the Alliance for Chesapeake Bay, and we have a few other even bigger ones like Chesapeake Bay Trust and Chesapeake Bay Foundation. Another one of mine, friends works for not an NGO but an environmental consulting firm that does a lot of stream restorations. So working with him to like go and see like what stream restorations are all about and how they conserve stream environments. And they're just like kind of the building blocks. If you have other thoughts, we have a pretty big TU, not in Southern Maryland, but in in the area that I grew up in, and around the Gunpowder River, we have a pretty strong TE presence. So potentially tapping into them. We also have some river keepers, some pretty big river keeper alliances for a couple bigger rivers in Maryland. And I'd be interested in maybe reaching out to them and seeing how we could be involved. But yeah, it's like I said before, like it's building blocks, right? Like eventually I'll probably get to the point where hopefully this, if they keep me around, this class will be extremely expansive and will be just, so much larger than when we started, with all the connections and ways students to get involved. So, that's the plan for sure.
Yeah, that was gonna lead into my next question: is where do you see this going? Do you see this going to be a class that could be taught on other campuses, different universities all over the country? Like, is this? To me, it seems, from the outside looking in, it seems like a very scalable course that you could be, the first one to start something great that could, go the expanse of the country. Is that something that you would like to take it to eventually?
That's tough. I think I will say they have a pretty much more well-defined fly fishing program at Penn State, and at State College. And I'm actually scheduled to talk with George Daniels, who helps oversee that program at Penn State. And that's like its own complete program. It's like the School of Fly Fishing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if, just because of our size at the college here, if we can do much more than what we're doing. I think the long term is one issue that and it's impossible to get around in the normal school year, is that the prime time in the East for matching the hatches and all that traditional dry fly fishing, which is not obviously not all of it, but it's such a big component of the class, is in June, and we don't have classes then. So I would love to do a kind of off premise, on location, smaller version of this class in this. We have summer classes. So in a summer class, I think there would be a pretty big cohort of students who'd be interested in that. So that's kind of where I see like maybe the long term is either transitioning it to a summer course, or doing a summer kind of auxiliary aspect of the course, or a smaller or a shorter version, but that's on location somewhere. That's where I would love to do that. That's a great way to, not a bad way to spend my summer for sure. After the article got published, I've had a few professors from other colleges reach out, just asking like how I approached, as the question, Jose, you talked about how I approached my department head to teach the class, how I pitched it to administration, and stuff like that. So I'm hoping that is just avenues for either those professors to start their own, or ways in which I could collaborate with them in either setting up the class or even teaching the class. There's so many colleges across the United States, but in the Delaware, DC, Maryland, Virginia area, there's so many schools, and especially when you get out into Monongahela or the Appalachian mountains, there's so many rural schools that this would be a perfect kind of class to kind of add into their repertoire. That I would love to either, again, like just talk to faculty members about how they could have the class, or pitch the class, or even collaborate with them to teach the class. There was a program at James Madison where a professor taught a class that I actually used as like kind of some guidance for setting up my class on fly fishing. I think he called it the science of fly fishing, which is very similar way to frame the class. That he taught it over the summer with an English professor, and some students some students also covered because there's so many books on fly fishing, both like how to fly fish, but also like very literary books, like River Runs Through It, and like those type of books that are like more traditional American literature. So like the class was co-listed as like an English class, and I don't remember what the other class was, like ecology class or bio class. So like I think that would also be an interesting way to explore here on the college, is could I get an English professor or a bio professor to teach? We have a marine science program here, and we have a class that's being offered by a faculty member called Fish and Fisheries. So like could I have that professor teach? I don't know that much about ecology, like the actual like physiology of fish. I know enough to get around, but I'm not, I didn't learn that in my education. So maybe he could teach that section of a summer class. So I'd be really interested in kind of seeing that portion for sure.
And especially up in that region, I mean, there's so many, trout species that are native and endemic that,
Mhm.
need protection. And, I mean, all over the country, there's smaller species that, some that are even recently being described as their own new species. Speaking of what, like here in Arkansas, there's the Neosho bass in 2024 got recognized as its own distinct species instead of being a subspecies underneath the northern smallmouth. So, I mean, there's species like that. And, in Texas, there was Guadalupe bass and things like that. So there's all these fish across the nation that tend to be struggling. And I feel like a class like this could also help aid other departments within fisheries and biology, departments of natural resources, things like that could potentially use and even maybe help with these classes. So that, I mean, there's, from the outside looking in, it seems like something that could be great for not only just the fishing community, but just for fish in general, fish and fisheries.
Yeah, and I think also from an academic standpoint, like there is, there's a lot of students in general, like, and I went to college when not that long ago when you had to go to college, so that you were just told you go to college, that's what you have to do. And now we're starting to see some pushback and a lot of kids coming out of high school saying, why would I spend all this money if I'm not going to learn something practical? And I think this course again is geared towards teaching them practical skills, even if they're more hobby-based skills, but also ones that they can extend into potential jobs and potential, skills that will make them more employable. And I think that foundation is what a lot of college courses need to shift more towards, if possible. Now, I know that like a Calc 1 class is going to be very hard to do that, but when possible, teaching the students the practical, hands-on applied skills will be more beneficial for them in the long run. So like framing that this is one way to do it, I think will help kind of academia and higher ed in general in this kind of moment where a lot of people are rightfully questioning if higher ed is the way to go, and is beneficial to them, right? So I think this is another reason why the style of teaching that we try to do here in general, but also for this class, is more geared towards those practical, applied experiential, learning techniques.
For sure. So speaking on that, so I mean, there, like you said, there are more people that are not following that path and going to college. So, like, say we have some listeners. Do you know of ways that they can get involved in conservation or citizen science efforts to help, like home waters and stuff like that?
Yeah, we have, at least in Maryland. I can speak to Maryland. We have it's called the Maryland Biological Stream Survey. That's actually sponsored by the Department of Natural Resources, where you can go through. I think it's a 1-day training, and you can learn how to do stream analysis. So you do like stream channel analysis. You also do some macroinvertebrate sampling, where you'll get like and then it's basically like a report card. So you'll score your stream based on the stream characteristics, and you'll score it based on the macroinvertebrate life that's there. So if there's caddis versus not caddis or mayflies there, it's going to be probably a better quality stream if they're than if they're not present. You're using those as indicators of stream health. And you can go through that program for free from the the Maryland Department of Natural Resources. Again, I think it's a relatively short program, and then you can just go to your local streams and do the stream classification and do the analysis for them, and then upload your data, and it's on a portal that anyone can access from the Maryland Biological Stream Survey, dating back to like I think the early 90s. So then it also allows you to see the longitudinal progress of a stream, right? And again, not like someone's not going out. I mean, likely not going out there every week, but if you have 5 samples of a stream over the course of 15, 20 years, and it's improving, that's good data to have, right? So, that's a great way, at least in Maryland, that we do, have the citizen science, incorporated. And a lot of colleges too, like there's a lot of ways, a lot of more push towards getting citizen science incorporated into research at the academic level. And and especially at small schools like ours, like we have a lot of faculty members that are doing community-based research that are maybe not having the community members do or be involved in the research, but helping or having the community members inform what questions to ask, right? Like what are their interests? What are they concerned about in their local, especially from an environmental standpoint? So there's plenty of ways in which individuals can be involved in that, for sure. And then from a fishing standpoint, just being a part of your local TU chapter, being a part of, if you have like local river keepers or watershed association, being a part or and volunteering towards them, I think is a great way to get involved. And I think the doors will just open up as you get involved in more in the things for sure.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of what's that company called? Science on the Fly?
Mm-mm.
So they do something very similar to what it sounds like your local DNR is doing there. And I don't know if last I heard, they were basically their staff couldn't keep up with the amount of people they had out there going and testing their local waters,
Yes, sir.
but they would send out kits monthly to people that would go and test their local waters. And so basically just any Joe Schmo that was always fishing could apply and say, hey, I want to be a data collector.
Mhm.
And so they would do the sampling for the company, and then the company would compile all the data. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, Science on the Fly was a part of the there was a Brushy Creek issue in Central Texas to where a water treatment facility was really affecting this creek and the watershed in whole. So I believe Science on the Fly was a part of that and getting it cleaned up. And turned out that the water treatment facility was like not doing what it was supposed to be doing and was majorly failing and putting fecal matter into the water. So I think they had a lot to do with that as well, but they do it all over the country. And so it seems like that might be something that, like I said, I don't know if they're still accepting applicants or how the process on that would be, but maybe they could be something that could help out with your class and kind of, or maybe y'all could sample and teach the students how to sample water, what to look out for, and that can kind of feed into the ecology side of it.
Yeah. No, that sounds very interesting. I definitely have to look into that. I think we do some water sampling as a part of when we do the macroverba sampling, but it's all in-house, right? We don't
I see.
use that data anywhere else, but I think that would be, if we could, especially, and then now even thinking towards like if we do a summer class one location, we could do sampling at some location that they wanted, particular community or wanted data on or something like that. So yeah, I think that's a great idea. And in general, right, we want our students in general, and I didn't speak the same way when I was in college. I didn't want to just do something for the sake of an assignment in the class. I wanted it to be part of something larger if possible. So like if, when the students, for example, were doing their final exam and they knew that it was going to be potentially their answer is going to be part of the Fly Lords article, we got much better work and much better responses as a result. So like having them, know that their work is part of something broader brings out the best in the students, right? So I think that's a great way to do that for sure.
Yeah, well, I'll send you a link to their website when we get off the podcast, and maybe that would be something that could be beneficial for both of y'all.
Definitely.
So, alrighty, Jose, you have any other questions before we get ready to close her out?
Oh man, that's such a good point to end on, I think. But I do have one. It's kind of lame, not gonna lie, but I'm just curious. We're talking about a lot of a lot of the students, right? They're interested in class and everything. But I was kind of curious, has there been any faculty members that have reached out to you that heard about what you're doing and maybe expressed interest in it as well?
There's one faculty member in the bio department who actually was already fly fishing. He goes to Michigan, I want to say, just because he does some field work during the summer in Michigan. So he uses that to also fly fish. And we haven't been able to get out. He also hunts locally. We haven't been able to get out to fish yet, but he reminds me every time I see him on campus, we need to schedule some time to go fishing. And then just in general, some faculty members that are just interested in the way in which as we talked about, the way in which I structured the class, and from a more pedagogy standpoint, how do I think about the ways in which students are learning from the class? A little nerdy, kind of perspective, but I think, they, like I said before, the reception of it has been resoundingly very positive, which is makes me very thankful and makes me feel very good for sure. So
No, that's awesome, man.
Awesome. Well, we really appreciate your time. I feel like this has been a great conversation, and I'm amazed by what you're doing over there. I think it's a great thing, and I'd love to see it grow in whatever, whatever that looks like. I would just love to see it grow because I think you're doing an amazing thing. So, but we appreciate your time, and for those of y'all watching, we appreciate y'all watching to the end, and we'll catch y'all next time.
This has been Wildlife Outdoors. Thanks for listening. Follow us on Facebook at Wildlife Outdoors and on Instagram at wild.life.outdoors. Let's go live life on the wild side.